You know, I'm gonna be honest, I did not have this on my bingo card. I'm Brittany, this is Eddie, and welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch gay things. So, I have been a Supernatural fan for about 9 years now. I've been to a convention in 2012. It is one of my big, forever, legendary fandoms that doesn't come and go in phases. It is a constant presence in my life. I am behind on parts of season 14 and basically all of season 15 for Supernatural, but that's for completely unrelated reasons. At least reasons unrelated to why we're here today. I, like many other fans, are planning on sticking through it all the way to the end out of a sense of loyalty to the show, more so than we think the show is still at its peak or doing its best work. I'm definitely one of those people who are of the opinion that the best years of Supernatural has been behind them for quite some time now, but we love the show and we love the cast and we just love everything so much that we are going to follow through right to the end, even if we don't think it's at its peak anymore. And also, when it comes to Supernatural, I don't ship Destiel. You would think I do, but I don't. It's just not my thing. I'm neutral about it. I've never really been one way or the other. The closest I ever got to Destiel was this kind of, in the back of my head, non-canon interpretation of Cass having unrequited feelings for Dean. That's about as far as I got. And this is going to be an incredibly ironic video, I am aware. Destiel, in case you don't know what it is and you don't watch Supernatural and you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about, Destiel is the ship name for the relationship between Dean Winchester and the angel Castiel. It is the most prominent ship in the fandom, and it has been enduring since season 4 when Castiel first appeared. So it's been around for a hot second. It's one of the biggies. You've probably heard of it even if you don't watch Supernatural. But that headcanon of mine was never really all that prominent for me when it came to the show. It was just more like on the back burner, yeah, probably, that kind of thing. Before I continue, I want to make one thing very clear, is that even before this episode last Thursday happened, Supernatural was never queerbaiting. It had been accused and practically common knowledge for a long time now that Supernatural queerbaited, and that was never actually true. It was kind of the opposite was true, really. The show and Jensen Ackles, who plays Dean, made it very clear more than once that Destiel was not intended. It was not canon. It just wasn't. Misha Collins, the guy who plays Castiel, different case, and could probably be the subject of another video entirely. They had to repeatedly say that Destiel was not intended and was not canon because a subsection of the fandom that we'll talk about more in a second was very loud and insistent and believed that because they interpreted things a certain way that interpretation was therefore must have been intended somehow. And queerbaiting comes down to artistic intent. The people who are making it have to intend to put in homoerotic or homosexual subtext for the purpose of stringing along a queer or queer supporting fan base in order to rank up their views. That is what queerbaiting is. And the show never did that. They never had that intent. Just because a lot of people were interpreting the show in a specific way does not mean that it was intended by the creators. And so Supernatural, even before this latest episode happened, was not an instance of queerbaiting. I just feel like I had to get that out there. Anyway, what the fuck happened on Supernatural, and why is everyone screaming that Destiel is canon? Here's what happened on the latest episode of Supernatural. Obviously, there will be spoilers. Cass confessed his love for Dean, and then Cass died. That is what happened. You'll forgive a lack of very specific context, because again, I am behind on the show, and I only know about this because when shit like this goes down, Tumblr tends to throw its tagging system out the window. Dean said nothing in response as this was happening, And thanks to a picture of the official script of this moment, it is made abundantly clear that Dean does not and cannot reciprocate. Destiel is canonically queer. He confessed his feelings for Dean, and Dean is canonically straight and does not return Destiel's feelings. So this was an unrequited love confession. That is what happened. That is the bare bones in terms of what was established as canon and what wasn't. What's tricky here is a bit of terminology. Usually when you say that a ship has gone canon, it implies that both characters have been established to have feelings for each other, and usually that they have now gotten together. And that is not exactly what happened here. We know that Cass has feelings for Dean, but Dean does not have feelings for Cass, and so it's an unrequited situation, and the terminology is a bit weird. I don't think we have a fandom term for exactly what happened, like they're half canon, they're unrequited canon, something along those lines. We really need to come up with something. So saying that Destiel is canon is a good shorthand, but ultimately it's a little bit weird because it's gone canon on one side. But for me, and I'm a writer and I'm nitpicky when it comes to terminology, hearing Destiel is canon everywhere isn't exactly the whole picture. And I think for someone who's on the outside looking in on the fandom right now, could be possibly misled. So I just wanted to make it abundantly clear as to what exactly was happening and what went canon and what didn't. Now, this is cause for celebration. This is a big fucking deal. We have been waiting for the past decade for this specific scenario to happen. Because what used to happen, what was always the case before now, was that a show would come along and fandom would invent a ship and latch onto a ship in that show. That ship would become very prominent and very popular and very well known, and then nothing would happen. Like, less than nothing would happen from a canon perspective. The feeling was always that there was a very rigid, like, you can have your interpretation, but there is no way on earth that we are ever going to entertain exploring that in the actual narrative. Which was pretty frustrating because more often than not, the ship that people would latch onto would actually have made the narrative in that show or that movie series or whatever way more interesting and would have been a very bold, layered choice to make for the characters involved. But now what has happened with Supernatural is just the end part of that is changed. So we had a show come along and fandom interpreted and invented a ship of their own that became very prominent and a permanent fixture for the fandom. It did not go away. It has endured for a little over a decade now. And this time, instead of being completely stonewalled by the showrunners and the writers, we actually got some, I don't really know what to call it, a collaboration, it's certainly not a concession, but they adapted. And that's the thing that we've been waiting for. Certainly what I've been waiting for. I've been waiting for a show to come along that said, hey, we didn't start with this in mind, but you know what? We can adapt, we can shift, we can change, we can embrace what all of these people are seeing as opposed to shying away from it because they're crazy fangirls or whatever the hell. Destiel confessing his queerness for Dean sets a very exciting precedent, and it shows media at large that, hey, you can in fact do this. Like, the world isn't going to explode. If you have a very significant portion of your fandom come to be invested in this certain thing, and the situation is right, and it doesn't kill anything in your narrative, and it actually would make a very interesting choice, you can make that choice even though that's not what you originally intended. It's a show made over several years, usually and hopefully. Like, you can adapt that narrative. It's not going to ruin anything. It's not going to spoil your precious baby. It could actually take it in a much more exciting direction. A big part of what queer fandom has been waiting for has now come to pass, which is that now there is a precedent for the powers that be to at least consider that sometimes, not every time, but sometimes fandom has the right idea. And hopefully what this means is that going forward, the odds have increased to be a little bit more in our favor. So that when the planets align just right and the situation is right and the context is right and the show itself is right, when certain things align, it should no longer be, and it is no longer, unheard of for queer feelings to be acknowledged in canon, even though they were not originally intended. In that respect, we're celebrating, we're partying, we're popping champagne bottles, even if you don't ship Destiel, even if you've never seen Supernatural. If you're part of queer fandom, now is a very exciting time. However, there are a few things about how this happened and how this came about, and this show in particular, and it happening on this show in particular, that does give me a little bit of concern going forward as well in terms of fandom as a whole and how it operates. There is a somewhat uncommon but weird strain of entitlement that goes through fandom, and I think this is only going to embolden that, or has at least has a great chance of emboldening that. A big reason why I never really gave Castiel having unrequited feelings for Dean much real estate in my brain is because there is a toxic minority in the Destiel fandom. As in, I'm kind of nervous to post this video because I simply state what was made canon and what wasn't, and because part of that involves Dean not reciprocating his feelings for Castiel, there is a very good chance that even though that is what happened, I am going to get numerous comments from this certain group of Destiel shippers that are going to be really nasty, because this minority of shippers have spent the past decade harassing people, pulling conspiracy theories out of the clear blue sky, and just generally being unbearable to the point where it put me off the ship entirely. And that's rare. That doesn't happen very often, because I like to just sit in my own little cubbyhole and only invite people in who I think are cool, right? So if a toxic minority of a shipping fandom is so loud and present and noxious that it puts me off a ship entirely, that doesn't happen every day. That has only happened twice, including Destiel, actually. I cannot look at the ship without hearing this minority in my head. And the thing is that for them, Castiel's feelings becoming canon are a huge reward for their behavior. And I hate that. Now, instead of being a toxic minority that kind of dies out eventually over the next few years after the show ends, now they are going to stick around and be insufferable forever. And they are going to do something else that actually leads me into my next point. They are going to assume and assert that every collection of dots that they connected, every theory they had, no matter how ridiculous or how unfounded or how random and weird, they're going to assume that everything they ever thought was right. And that further muddies the already kind of murky waters of fan interpretation versus artistic intent. Because, once again, this is what happened. Fandom interpreted queerness where it was not intentionally present, which is a fantastic pastime that I fully endorse. That queerness became incredibly popular, and then the showrunners eventually decided to make part of that queerness canon. But I'm afraid that sort of connected to now they're going to assume that everything they ever thought was right. Now people on the outside are going to look at Supernatural and think it was intentional from the beginning. And they're going to be looking at things that happened that did not have the canonical intent of being queer, but that you can read queer things into and then think that it was artistically intended. You see this loop that's going around? then fans could very well look at this and think that it was intended from the beginning, and or that everything they ever thought about the show, every theory they ever had, was exactly right. They're going to take that fandom experience and then go into other fandoms believing that they're some expert in reading queer subtext that is intended, when they're not. This could mean a lot more entitlement, a lot more stubbornness, a lot more narrow-mindedness, a more intense echo chamber, and just a lot more bad takes about things, because look at what Supernatural did. How do I feel about this? It's more, to me, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Because, I mean, they did kill Cass the second he confessed to queer feelings. And the bury your gays trope is one of the worst queer tropes to exist. So even though Supernatural did this thing, yay, they also did this other thing that is very not yay. He could come back by the end of the series, because this is Supernatural and they've been jumping the shark for about 8 seasons now. But still, hey, I'm queer, now I'm dead, is the worst look. And while all of this does lend some much needed validity between the queer shipper and showrunner relationship, it could also encourage even more of some certain types of behavior that we needed less of to begin with. So I'm happy for everybody, and I'm happy for queer fandom, and I'm happy for a few pretty big reasons, but it also comes with a couple of caveats that I can't help but be concerned with going forward. And then, of course, they also killed him the second he admitted to queer feelings, which, again, what? That's how I see it. That's what I'm thinking right now. I would love to talk about this with you guys in the comments, as long as things stay civil. If you're just gonna rip my head off, I am not going to dignify you with a response. But if you want to debate the finer points of how this affects queer fandom, or how this affects you, or what exactly happened and how they handled it, come talk to me. This is a big moment for us. Congrats to the numerous lovely Destiel shippers that are out there. This is absolutely a wonderful time to be alive for you. I hope you are partying so hard that you don't remember what you did the next day. I wish you a lifetime of beautiful fix-it fix in which Dean reciprocates Cass's feelings. I wish you all the best. What a time to be alive for you guys. I am envious. Go nuts. Go buck wild. Just go mad. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this interesting. Please take care of yourself, and here are some end cards.